Mark Whitmore here, head coach, Lodestone True North. Backing the bus off business owners, putting them back in the driver's seat. This is podcast episode 004. Glad you joined us. And today we're going to continue our conversation around this book, Culture Code, Daniel Coyle. Killer book. And I am going to read from the front leaf to get us started. Where does culture come from? How do we build and sustain it in your group or strengthen a culture that needs fixing? So I'm gonna stop right there. You're owning and operating an organization, and if you don't have your pulse on the fact that culture is a huge deal, you need an adjustment, mental adjustment. Right here on the front kind of says the secret of highly successful groups. So you got yourself a group, you got a group of folks you're trying to put together, lead, organize, take somewhere, get some stuff done. You got some money, you got some place you're trying to go to, and you're going to want to tap into some of the secrets of highly successful groups. So sorry for that little tangent. In the Culture Code, Daniel Coyle goes inside some of the world's most successful organizations, including the U.S. Navy SEAL Team 6, IDEO, and the San Antonio Spurs, and reveals what makes them tick. He demystifies the culture-building process by identifying 3 key skills that generate cohesion and cooperation, and explains how diverse groups learn to function with a single mind. Let me pause there again. So, demystifying what it takes to generate cohesion and cooperation. That sounds like an absolute gold mine if you're leading an organization, right? Cohesion and cooperation. We need to figure out how to do that. Drawing on examples that range from internet retailer Zappos to the comedy troupe Upright Citizens Brigade to a daring gang of jewel thieves, Coyle offers specific strategies that trigger learning, spark collaboration, build trust, and drive positive change. Coyle unearths helpful stories of failure that illustrate what not to do, troubleshoots common pitfalls, and shares advice about reforming a toxic culture. Combining leading-edge science, on-the-ground insights from world-class leaders and practical ideas for action, the Culture Code offers a roadmap for creating an environment where innovation flourishes, problems get solved, and expectations are exceeded. So pause again here. I'm sorry to keep doing these little tangents, but isn't that what we're after, right? Flourishing innovation. So if you're saying, hey, Bob, my company, the way we talk about stuff around here, the way you can identify my companies, we have flourishing innovations, problems get solved, and expectations are exceeded all day, every day. Cool. Check that box, right? That's what we're after. Culture is not something you are, it's something you do. The Culture Code puts the power in your hands. No matter the size of your group or your goal, this book can teach you the principles of cultural chemistry that transform individuals into teams that can accomplish amazing things together. Great read. I got to tell you, I love this book. I've read it a few times already. Going to read it many more in the future, using it with my client work. I've got my clients reading it, etc. So I just want to kind of talk for a few minutes about what is in the book, kind of overview of this book. We talked in a previous episode about some particulars when I interviewed Jeremy Pryor. You can check out episode, I think it's 002, to find out how he is using some of the principles in this book in his family and in his business. But I'm going to kind of break this down. The book's broken down into 3 major sectors or major sections. The first is around building safety, and that's his first point, is in order to have a killer culture, an effective culture, you need to build safety into your folks, into your culture. And that is not kind of a phony baloney, feel-good statement. If you think about your own inner kind of reality, you need to be around folks that have your best interest in mind, that you trust, that are worth trusting, and that they have your back and you have their back, and that's safety. Where you trust their involvement and they trust yours. And so he goes through in the first segment of the book using some high performing teams, as well as using a lot of really interesting scientific studies and publications to show how safety, building safety, personal safety, and I mean like in a relational kind of emotional sense, how that is the bedrock in many ways of a great culture. So that's the first section. Second section of the book is sharing vulnerability. So we need to go from building safety to sharing vulnerability. And he uses a couple other teams here to illustrate this, and one of them is Navy SEALs, SEAL Team 6. So he goes quite a bit into a practice of many of the military units called AAR, or After Action Review. And basically what you can see from an after action review, let me go into that just for a second here, is it's kind of 5 things. So let's say last week we were trying to win the week. How'd we do last week in an organization? An after action review is just meant to say, well, what happened? How'd that go? So there's kind of 5 parts. The first is what happened? Just factually, what happened last week, let's say. The second is what did we intend to have happen? So what was our objective and what actually came about? The third is what caused that? What made that come about? The fourth is what are we going to do differently next time? And the fifth is what are we going to do the same? And that's a great tool, by the way. I have a little teaching called Attack of the Acronym on my online teaching courses, where I'll show you how to build a great acronym, and I use the after action review to help you build a tool to deploy in your business to use an after action review as a get her done kind of tool. So I digress. In sharing vulnerability in the second segment of the book, he dives into the culture code of SEAL Team 6. And as one of the things that makes SEAL Team 6 top notch is they're constantly learning. They're constantly looking at what they did and trying to figure out how to do it better. And in order to do that, you have to have a culture of shared vulnerability. You have to be able to say, all right, that got screwed up. How come? Who did it? Who's going to own that? And everybody needs to be able to be open and honest in order to say, yeah, this is what I could have done better. This is what you could have done better. If you've got a bunch of hotheads, a bunch of egomaniacs, a bunch of folks who are insecure, you can't be vulnerable. If you're vulnerable, you'll get attacked. You'll get kind of undermined. You'll get, your legs cut out from under you. So that's the second part of this book, is how to effectively create a culture in which you truly look at what each other's doing and share some vulnerability in a way that you get better. Look, we all kind of suck at one way or another, and you need the folks around you to be able to speak into you. And if you're not vulnerable, if you're afraid to be vulnerable, you might have good reasons, but they're not good enough. And it's going to hold you back from becoming a great culture. So that's the second part of the book. Third part is establishing purpose. So he pulls in this quote or a study from Inc. magazine, and Inc. magazine had done, and I don't remember the particulars on the study, but they interviewed about 600, I believe, CEOs, and asked them, hey, how well are you communicating in your mind your vision and where you're going and kind of the truths about your organization? How well are you communicating that to your folks? And the gist of it was 64% of the CEOs felt like they were just smoking it, that they were nailing the communication of their vision and kind of future and where they're going and the culture and all that, that they were really doing a great job sharing that with their people. So then what Inc. magazine did is they went to those CEOs folks and asked them. And it was pretty interesting. 2%, not 64, 2% of the people said, yeah, we understand the vision. We know what the guy's talking about. We've heard it. We get it. It was very, very different. So in this third section of the book, Establishing Purpose segment, Daniel Coyle goes into quite a bit of detail of how some of these high-performing teams over communicate where they're going, and he gives you some tools and tactics and techniques on how to do that, and it's really interesting, and there's going to be a lot of great stuff you're going to pull out of there. So kind of my takeaway, I had 4 takeaways, and I'm not going to dig any deeper into the book right now. I'll do other kind of in-depth looks at other times, but I had 4 kind of takeaways that just popped out that as I go through my day and I think about some of these 4 things. So the first one is some sticky phrases. There are a number of these cultures that a common denominator is that they produce these sticky little slogans and sayings, and sometimes they're kind of dorky and sometimes they're really, really unique and they have a ton of meaning only for those folks. But they're phrases and statements that people can remember inside in the heat of the moment, and they help the folks in the culture perform microprocesses really simply. So that was kind of my first takeaway, is that those little kind of microprocess, simple little sticky sayings are really powerful in helping you to get your kind of vision and microprocesses baked into your team. Second is that culture can be and needs to be demystified. It's not that confusing. It really doesn't need to be as complicated as we're making it. Now, it is complex in that there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of dynamic interaction between people that can affect culture, but it really can and should be demystified, and the book does a great job doing that. My third takeaway is it's important to undercomplicate your tooling, and not to oversimplify it, but to undercomplicate it. And what I mean by that is just that there's important things we need to get done, and because they're complicated in this cultural, intangible space, we tend to do a really bad job taking care of it. So we've got to create some simpler, undercomplicated ways of doing that, and there's lots and lots of examples through the book. As a side note, some of these examples may perhaps be a little anecdotal, but not really. I mean, I came away from this saying, this guy really knows what he's talking about. He pulls in tons of very well vetted scientific studies. He's got a lot of great footnotes. This is not just some fluff opinion piece. This is a well-thought, well-researched book full of great high-tech or high performing examples. Not, this isn't. He's not interviewing Chuck in a truck. He's not interviewing the guy that owns the donut shop down the street. These are folks that are at the top of their game and are very well respected for their culture and their performance. So that was demystifying culture. That was my third takeaway. And the last one is repetition, the importance of repeating as a principal, as an owner operator, the importance of you repeating the truths about who we are, why we do what we do, where we're going, how we're going to get there. That kind of vision code, culture code, hey, this is who we are, or what, all that. So those are some of my takeaways. Again, this is a great book. Highly encourage you, if you haven't gotten it yet, to read it, get it, dig into it. Audio is a great way to read this thing as well. So, Culture Code by Daniel Coyle. Just a quick little message I wanted to give you. Mark Whitmore, head coach, Lodestone, True North.